Hola, hola, Diandra, ¿cómo estás?
Muy bien, ¿y tú?
Bien, gracias. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I am just really excited because I've been following your page through my personal account, but also like now through Viva la Mami. And I think the work that you're doing is so impactful and very helpful for many Latina mamis out there. And I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. So thank you. So, before I kind of go into and delve into the conversation about bilingualism and raising bilingual kids, I would like to first know a little bit more about you. So, tell me about yourself, where you live, your family, and what is it that you currently do?
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's such an
Yes.
honor.
Thank
So,
you.
my name is
Thank you.
Diandra Morse. I am a licensed clinical social worker in New York State. I live in upstate New York, near Syracuse. That's usually everyone knows Syracuse University. So, near Syracuse, I have a private practice where I see clients in our community and I provide therapy, but I also run Bilingual Playdate, which is it's a brand that focuses on advocating, educating, and everything that has to do with parenting bilingual children and encouraging parents to get educated really and to
Mhm.
get clear on their goals, get clear on what kind of bilingualism journey they want to be on, and find community and empowerment in being in this bilingual playdate community.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm sure it's a busy schedule for you on a day-to-day basis because you're still practicing and then you
Mhm.
obviously oversee your social media account and it's been very, I've been following you for some time and it's just thriving and it is great and it is telling that there is a need, right?
Mhm.
About education and kind of awareness about bilingualism. And I don't know about you, but I grew up in the 90s where oftentimes it's like, okay, you are being brought up bilingual, but
Mhm.
there wasn't really a strategy. I really don't know what my parents really did to
To
raise
make this
me.
happen.
Yeah, and I do know Spanish. That Spanish was my first language, but
Mhm.
now I'm mostly predominant English. But now that I have a son, and even before pregnancy, I was like, okay, I know that I want to raise our children bilingual, but what is the right way? Is there a right
Mhm.
way? Is there an actual method, right? And so one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, like, is there a strategy involved? Or is it just like, oh, aquí estamos con el abuelito y la abuelita, and we're just going to speak Spanish, right? So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I grew up in the Dominican Republic, and my parents literally their strategy was like they sent me to school, and my school was bilingual, and so I learned English in school. Yeah, through school. Their strategy was we speak Spanish in our house and we live in the DR, and so that's going to be what we do. But I don't think that they were conscious at all. Like when I talk to them about strategies about raising bilingual children, they're like, "What?" They don't really, it's not the same, you know.
Yeah.
Obviously both of my parents spoke Spanish. My spouse and I both speak Spanish, but he kind of took on it as we started our parenting journey, and it was something that we knew we wanted to do, but it wasn't something that we were like super specific or clear or intentional about because my parents didn't have a plan, so I didn't have that point of reference. And so it
Mhm.
wasn't until later that I was more like, okay, there has to be like a strategy or like a way to do this, you know? So I'm just going to speak Spanish to my kids and then see what happens. And so that's kind of how I started my own journey. But then that's actually one of the reasons why I started Bilingual Playdate was because I didn't have any orientation as to
Mhm.
how to raise bilingual children, especially in upstate New York, which is very different than New York City. So when I say New York, everyone's like, oh, it's so easy. It's in the city. And I'm like, no, I don't live in the city. I live in upstate New York. And so in upstate New York, I don't have as much access to a Spanish speaking community. And so I didn't really know or had any guidance. So I started my bilingual playdate and I got connected too. So these are the two accounts that I think everyone should follow if they're raising bilingual children and are looking for like strategies. And I'll
Yes.
explain why these accounts are like saving grace. So Bilingüitos, Kayla Diaz,
Mhm.
and Billy Kids underscore DE, Rebecca Enberg. So they study social linguistics, they're linguists, and their area of study is how to preserve language and family bilingualism, family language policy. And so, and those are big words, but basically what that means is that there are strategies to raise bilingual children. And I can tell you some of them. So one of the most popular ones are one parent, one language. So one parent speaks English and one parent speaks Spanish. And a lot of times that's very popular because it's kind of in the United States, it's kind of taboo to raise kids kind of the way my parents did, where they did minority language at home, but Spanish wasn't a minority language in the Dominican Republic. But when we moved to the United States, they continue on with Spanish. So that's kind of more rare to do minority language at home. But actually, what I found in my community is that it's not as rare, and that it is actually a great strategy if you're able to do it. And even if your partner is not fully fluent, like my husband isn't fully fluent, you still can do minority language at home. And so those are kind of like the two big ones. Another strategy is time and place. So you choose when you're speaking the language. So let's say a family can speak English maybe most of the time, but most of the time, but then they have designated times carved out where they're going to be speaking Spanish or French or whatever language they have chosen. But I love to connect people with Kayla and Rebecca, and that's one of the things that Bilingual Playdate does. Like, it's a community that hubs other resources so that parents can do this journey in the best way. But I love connecting with them because they can give you access to the research, but also what is your plan? Because not everyone's plan is bilingual and biliterate children. Like, some people just want to expose their child to another language, or they just want them to be able to communicate some with the abuelitos, but it's not like full fluency. And so the more clear we are, the better we can know what strategy to choose versus just winging it, because it doesn't work to just wing it in the US. It doesn't work.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I had this preconceived notion that you expose these children with abuelito, abuelita, they're going to learn the language, y se les va a grabar, right? Everything is going to be so
Because they're
ingrained.
sponges.
Right, they're sponges. But once they start school, and if they don't go to like a dual language or bilingual program and English is exclusively spoken 100% in the classroom, they may lose the language. And even though they're still bilingual, right? But if you have these expectations of them speaking it back to you when you're conversating, you know, they're not going to be proficient, or they're not going to feel comfortable in speaking the language. And so, yeah, so it's always like, I always feel like we get a bunch of like backlash from older generations. It's like, well, you know, we raised them bilingual, or we raised them in like full Spanish, but it's like, well, there's actually strategies and, you know, different methods involved, and intentionality too, right? Like, what is your intention when you're raising a bilingual child? But there's so much to learn, right? Like, there's so many resources. And so I do appreciate you sharing Bilinguitos and Billy Kids.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
And I'll
so
make
those
sure.
are good ones. Yeah, so I will, and I know you'll include it, but I'll also share their handles because they are like everyone. So like my community, we talk about like the grind, like the everyday of bilingual parenting, but they are the ones that like can set you up so that you know what your grind is. Because mine is biliterate and bilingual, and so the things that I may choose to do may not be something that someone else chooses to do. And a lot of times, you know, I've had conversations where people are like, oh my God, it feels like a sacrifice, like raising bilingual kids. And I'm like, it can feel like a sacrifice, but anything that we want is really inconvenient. Like, so my best analogy to explain my own bilingual goals is that if I wanted my child to get a scholarship, a full ride to play at SU, at our university, basketball, I would have to do so much so that that happens. I would have to get them into a basketball league, make sure that they're training, make sure that they're practicing in the summer, they're doing camp, they're doing travel teams, they're doing all kinds of things so that they can get better at their skill. They're not just going to get accepted into the university without being the best of the best. And so with bilingual parenting, it's kind of the same. You have to, if it's something that you want, you'll find that the things that you have to do to achieve it in the way that you want it, that are just like if you wanted your child to to get a full ride for something that they're really good at. And so,
Yes.
yeah, it's any goal. If you want to lose weight, if you want to learn how to sing, if you want to learn how to cook, like you have to make time in your schedule and make it so it's a part of your life. And so
Right.
so the abuelitos and putting that pressure on the abuelitos doesn't really work because they're not, they can't be there. I mean, some people have a really nice setup where their parent is like living with them. And I wish my mom lived with us. That would be amazing input. And she comes and stays with us for like weeks. And that's always great for our family. But realistically, that's not realistic for a lot of families. And so thinking that the kids will just get it through the grandparents, it would be nice, but it's not always possible. And a lot goes into it. And I think that that's
Right.
the part that our communities don't really understand. And I
Right.
think the abuelitos don't understand. They're like, why doesn't it happen? Why are they not speaking, why are they speaking English to me and not Spanish? And it's like, well, their days are in English and they don't have enough Spanish input to like balance it out.
Right.